Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this morning's panel. Thank you very much for the introduction, Victor. As he just explained, I'm Joanne Hart. I write the Midas share column for the Mail on Sunday and Mail Online. When I first started out as a journalist, we used typewriters, and they weren't even electric. A teenager, barely out of school, would run with our copy from the news desk to the sub-editors so that the articles could be printed. It really was not very technical. I say this not to show how long I've been in the job, but just to highlight how far we've come. In those days, everyone smoked, everyone drank, the heating was on all the time, the lights never switched off. Concepts like energy efficiency or health and wellness would have been met with blank stares. It's very different today. We are in the middle of a revolution. It's exciting, it can definitely be dangerous, and it will undoubtedly create winners and losers. So we're here now with my panelists looking at some of the most exciting technologies out there, and crucially, the best investment opportunities, how to weed out the imposters and find the hidden gems in what are really, I would say, three of the most central technologies of the future: climate change and how to fight it, life sciences, how to live better lives and longer lives, and of course, AI, the topic of the moment. So helping us are three excellent panelists. So I've got next to me Barry Downs of Mindflare, which is an AI company. I've got Jonathan Maxwell from SDCL. He's an energy efficiency guru. And Drew Burdon of EQT Life Sciences, the private equity firm. And I'd like now for each of them to introduce themselves, starting with you, Barry.
Thank you, Joanne. I'm Barry Downs. And my background is as a software entrepreneur. Previously, I built and sold a software company to Red Hat. And after that, I became a venture capital investor in software technologies. And today, I guess I'm here to talk about AI and Mindflare, which is an AIM-listed investment company that's building a portfolio of high-growth AI companies. And AI, which obviously stands for artificial intelligence, is one of the most exciting technologies out there right now. AI is the simulation of human intelligence and then the application of it by computer systems to problems in society and in the enterprise. And right now we're going through a massive inflection point of AI adoption. Now, we're probably all familiar with AI through things like predictive analytics, which have been around for some years. That's your Amazon-style people who bought this product also like the other products, and that's predicting what you might like. But and that's been around for about 10 years now. But what's really exciting right now are technologies such as computer vision and also large language models, and that's a large language model is ChatGPT, for example.
I'm going to stop you there, Barry, because we're going to talk about that in more detail shortly. Jonathan, why don't you introduce yourself and the company?
Great. Well, great to meet everybody today. Jonathan Maxwell, Sustainable Development Capital. We invest in energy. Energy is everywhere. Everything and everyone depends on it. But the angle we take on energy is that we're trying to solve the biggest problem associated with it. Energy, not only does everybody and everything depend on it, but it causes negative outcomes like climate change and conflict. But the most extraordinary thing, the biggest, dirtiest secret of the energy sector, is completely extraordinary, is that most of it's wasted. And there's something we can do about it. So for the last 15 years, we've been developing and investing in solutions, some technologies which are very conventional, where the biggest innovation would be applying them rather than inventing anything new. And huge opportunities we've invested in across the world through our London Stock Exchange listed investment company, SEIT, the SDCL Energy Efficiency Income Trust. But we also invest in technology companies that are designing solutions for the energy systems of the future. How are data and AI going to be powered? How cooled, frankly, going forward? So we're investing in companies like Isotope that do that with precision liquid cooling. And then on the upside, how do we heat the world? And we have investments in that portfolio too.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Drew, last but definitely not least.
Thank you, Joanne. Yeah, my name is Drew, and I'm a partner with EQT. EQT are an alternative investment firm. We've been investing for over 3 decades. We currently have 230 billion euros of assets under management. We invest in, we have offices in over 25 countries. We employ 2,000 people. We only invest where we have people on the ground. We call that our locals with locals approach. We're also a highly thematic investor. For example, in private equity, we're number 1 globally in healthcare and number 3 in technology. Since 2016, we've invested in about 26 private equity buyouts with a cumulative enterprise value of about 75 billion euros. Within EQT Group, I work for EQT Life Sciences. We're a specific venture capital group investing only in EQT Life Sciences. We've invested over the last 2 decades in about 150 private companies, raising about 3 billion euros of capital. I've been there for about 5 years, working specifically on what we call our health economics strategy. That's medtech, digital and diagnostics. Prior to that, I was with Smith & Nephew, a FTSE 100 listed company, working ultimately in their corporate development transactions team. And by training, just to conclude, I'm a scientist. I have a degree and a PhD in the biological sciences, as well as an executive MBA.
So you can see that we have 3 very distinguished panelists with us today. And what we really want to know about, guys, is some of the trends, some of the really innovative trends that are taking place in your respective fields. Why don't we start with you, Drew, and keeping an eye on the time.
Yeah, thank you. Feel free to make me a little bit quicker if you need to. So I'm going to describe some of the fundamental trends that we believe makes life sciences investing not only very attractive, but also very important. So if we start with the fundamentals, we know the population is growing, we know the population is relatively getting older, and therefore the population is getting sicker. Diseases like cardiovascular diseases, things like cancers, Alzheimer's, diabetes, stroke, to name but a few, are causing an increase in the requirement for healthcare expenditure. In fact, in the UK, if you look back into 1990, we spent about 5 or 6% of GDP on healthcare. If you jump forward to today, that amount is now 12 or 13%. That's a doubling of healthcare expenditure through a relatively small period. And we don't think that's sustainable. We think that threatens our ability to provide healthcare across our populations. And that's the fundamental principle that we use within our healthcare, our health economic strategy, which is to invest in best and first-in-class technologies to improve patient outcomes whilst taking costs out of the health economy. Now, it's not all a bad news story. There's lots of really exciting technology developments going on in things like AI and things like virtual reality and robotics. And they're contributing to some themes that we're seeing in healthcare that could help us and are really interesting investment targets for us. So to give you a few examples, the ability to treat a patient in the physician's office rather than in the operating room. It's obviously much more convenient for a patient, and it's also much cheaper for the healthcare system. And we have an investment in a company called Neurant Medical, who are doing exactly that with patients suffering from chronic rhinitis. To give another example, being able to diagnose and monitor patients in their own home rather than requiring them to continually go to hospital, again, is cost effective, it's convenient, and really importantly, it allows you to make more and more frequent monitoring. And again, in those spaces, we have a company called Anira Health, who have an at-home sleep diagnostic solution. And we have a company called Endotronics, who have an implantable remote patient monitoring system for heart failure patients.
So I think we'll hear a little bit more about those in a short while, but basically it's all about trying to treat people away from hospital. In the office, at home.
Yeah, there are of course other themes, but there are two really important ones, and we've seen that over the last decade, and that will happen more and more.
And Jonathan, what about in your spaces? As you've just said, one of the big problems with energy is how much is wasted, which I think most of us aren't aware of. So do you want to talk about how we can kind of try and combat that?
Yeah, so the big problem with energy is that about half of it is wasted when you have centralized energy generators. It just goes up as basically as heat. So one of the big solutions is, rather than building energy out in the countryside and wasting the heat and bringing whatever is left into town, you lose another 10% on the way. Instead, you can build energy where it's needed. So take a data center, which is one of the big trends going on at the moment, one of the biggest users of energy in any economy. How do you get power and even cooling into the data center? Well, rather than building it in the country, build it right next to, underneath, or on top of the data center. Use whatever best resources you've got, whether it's the electrical or the gas grid. It could be, frankly, the ground and air source heat. It could be solar. So that's one of the big trends, Joanne, which is kind of trying to figure out how you get better solutions to the point of use. Data centers is one of the biggest, fastest growing, most innovative areas of what we do. It's our biggest market. We provide cooling services into data centers through new technology. Second big trend is in the healthcare sector. The biggest user of energy in the UK and any country around the world typically is the government. The government wastes not just energy getting where it's needed, but inside buildings. Joanne and I have talked in the past about the fact the NHS hasn't even changed most of its light bulbs. The simplest thing you can do is these are LED. Take a conventional lamp and switch it to LED. It cuts 90% of the energy. Why hasn't the NHS changed the lights? It costs money, but that's what we're in business to do, to invest in solutions like that. So healthcare has a long way to go. It's actually the biggest user of energy in this country, 4 or 5% of all energy and resources. Transport is a very big area. We hear about electric cars. One of the big problems is how you're going to charge them. So coming up with a solution to that is, again, what our investment trust has been doing. We've now built the largest network of ultra-fast charging points across the country. If any of you went to the NEC in Birmingham and wanted to charge your car, do it in 10 to 20 minutes. Have a cup of coffee while you wait at the BP Pulse fast charging station that we've built there with 180 charge points. So it's taking some of these enormous problems. Who's using the energy? 70% of it's buildings, industry, and transport. How do we get it to them? Build it on site rather than in the middle of nowhere. And then what is going to happen to that energy at the point of use? And instead of it being wasted, about a third of which is at the moment in hospitals, universities, in steel mills, cement plant, instead of that, invest in solutions to those problems: lighting, heating, ventilation. Last point I'll make about innovation is the energy sector. Everybody thinks it's about power. Everything that you would have heard almost for the last 20 years is around renewable power, which we love. But here's the problem: it's only 20% of the energy system is electricity, and only a third of that is renewable. So when we talk about new technologies and solutions or new applications at scale, it has to be thinking about heat. We have thermal heat batteries in our portfolio that can store heat at 1,500 degrees. Why? That's because what you need for industry. So it's not just about electricity, it's about heat, it's about transport, and that's what our investment trust is in the business of doing, solving those problems, generating cash. We're a bit boring, we're making about 100 million a year of cash, about 80 million of EBIT, but we are investing in the solutions of tomorrow that we can actually find and that work today.
So Barry, I think your Mindflare would love to be generating 100 million of cash. Tell us about Mindflare, which is a small company, but I mean, investing in the most exciting trends in AI. Tell us about some of
For sure.
those.
Thanks very much, Joanne. So first of all, it's wonderful to be investing in this area of artificial intelligence. It's expected to become a $2.5 trillion industry by the end of the decade. And the challenge for most public market investors at the moment is there's very few AI companies on the public markets outside of big tech, such as Microsoft or Meta or Google, for example. And so what Mindflare was designed to do was to invest in this new wave of AI companies that are emerging and get in and invest at these companies at an early stage and then benefit from the growth of these companies as they become the next billion-dollar companies of the future. So in Mindflare, we're investing in a whole range of software AI areas, including generative AI, and that's kind of like the area that you might have seen with ChatGPT, for example, or if somebody's seen Sora recently, which is kind of text to animation. But we're also investing in other key areas of AI, including computer vision. So for example, we've invested in a company called Every Angle, which is what they're doing is they're helping retail customers, traditional bricks and mortar retail, get the same data in the real world through AI that they would get through their website. So customer analytics, who's visiting the store, what the demographics are, what the wait times are, and that's all through cameras and then analyzing the images that come from cameras. Another interesting area that we're investing in generative AI is called large language models. And this is, for example, natural language processing or things like customer service. So a really good example of this is Klarna released an app recently that replaced 700 people in their call center through one app. 2.5 million interactions per day coming through their app.
And is that sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Is that sort of AI speaking instead of call centers, basically?
That's exactly it. So there's a number of ways you can do that. You can actually interact with an app in natural language, or you can ring up a call center and it's AI talking to you and handling most of your queries. It's still good right now to have some humans in the loop. So we believe this technology can handle about 80% of the volume coming through customer service, whether that's voice or text. But there's still 20% at the moment that will go to humans. That will change. I mean, I think over the course of the next few years, most customer service will be replaced by artificial intelligence. And that will also find its way into the enterprise. So
the enterprise being the companies, business.
Yeah, companies, businesses. So, for example, we've invested in a company called Jade, which is bringing that technology to financial services centers here in the city and also in New York. And that's automating a lot of cross-organizational email analysis. So, let's say trade confirmations when somebody's buying stocks. And if somebody's doing a query through email, analyzing that and responding to it. So we're really at the verge of this massive rollout of these generative technologies into companies that will have profound productivity benefits and actually restructure how these companies are operating. I think I'm
going to interrupt you for a second.
I
mean, I think this sounds profoundly scary to anybody who's actually in work, but I'm sure you can tell us otherwise. Do you want to just, I'm aware of time ticking on very, very quickly, but I'd really like each of you to give us a couple of the most exciting investments that you're looking at the moment or that you've just invested in. Barry, why don't you start as you're on a roll?
So first of all, what I would say is the opportunity for investors with Mindflare is currently, Mindflare has a portfolio of 19 high-growth AI companies. And it's actually a great time to get into Mindflare as well because it's currently trading at a discount to its NAV. And over the next 3 years, we're going to take that 19 companies to 55 companies. And some very quick examples of companies we've invested in one would be Jade, which is bringing this generative AI to businesses in financial services. Another one would be Capture. And what Capture is doing is it's bringing image and video commerce to logistics. So for example, if you look at Forest, which provides scooters, for example, That's integrated now when you're parking your scooter and you take out your phone and you take a picture to show that it's parked correctly. That's all through Capture. And Capture is also working with parcel delivery services to make sure that the parcel is delivered to the right address and the service can prove it as well. And maybe another one I might highlight would be a company called Redenize. And Redenize is transforming how animation is created. So things like animation for TV or Pixar-style movies. In the future, you'll be able to do that through a process called text to animation, where you actually you tell the computer what you want to create, and then it creates the animated cartoon for you. So Redenize is in that space as well.
Wow. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we have two other wonderful panelists with us too. Jonathan, tell us a couple of examples of some of the of investments that you've made that are really exciting.
So we have a private equity portfolio inside of the SDCL Energy Efficiency Income Trust listed in London. And that's where the really exciting stuff is happening. That's the high temperature process heat batteries, which are basically huge, enormous ceramic style batteries that can charge up using renewable power, hold their heat, hooded as heat at 1500 degrees, and then redispatch it into industrial applications or even turn it back to power. That's exciting. It will change the game. In fact, the big Portuguese utility, EDP, backed that company with a big announcement this week. We've invested in it with Bill Gates and the Breakthrough Energy Ventures. So that's where the really exciting stuff is. Isotope, which does precision liquid cooling, which will change the game completely as to how you can do high temperature computing like AI. Outside of that, though, outside of our private equity portfolio, we can build things and construct things in SEEIT. We've got the largest portfolio of its kind in commercial industrial on-site energy for solar and storage and steel mill energy recycling. We've got a boring wrapper around it, which I love because it generates so much cash, where we provide on-site energy to industry, the manufacturing, agriculture. And then last point I'll make is the thing that excites me as an investor in that company is at the moment we're generating, for today's share price, which is about 25-30p, in other words, 25-30% lower than the prevailing net asset value, at least, with a 9.5% dividend yield. There's a total return on a portfolio, Joanne, that I think is enormously compelling. So that is a fantastic entry point.
Thank you very much. And Drew, I mean, life sciences, health, we all want to know how we can live better and longer lives. So you and I have discussed some of the exciting investments that you've been looking at. Do you want to tell everyone here a little bit more about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So within our health economic strategy, we've made about 25 investments over the last 2 decades. But I'm going to focus on our most recent investment. It was a deal that we did only 2 weeks ago. We actually press released it last week.
Wow.
And it's in a UK company called Phgenesis. So Phgenesis have developed and are now commercializing a treatment for patients suffering with dysphagia, which is a difficulty in swallowing. So there are hundreds of thousands of patients in hospitals who suffer with this condition, and it comes as a result of things like stroke, things like traumatic brain injuries, or maybe just because a patient's been mechanically ventilated for too long. And of course, for a patient, it's fairly devastating. It compromises nutritional status and means that patients can't manage their own secretions. So for the patient, it also puts them at risk of potentially life-threatening complications, such as things like aspiration pneumonia. So for the patient, it's a bad situation. It's also a really bad situation for the hospital, for the healthcare facility. The intensive care unit is about the most expensive place you can be in a hospital. And therefore, if you've got patients who are in there for longer than they need to be, the cost to the healthcare system just starts stacking up and up and up. The product itself is a neurostimulation device. In essence, it's a feeding tube. It goes up somebody's nose into the stomach, which happens with every patient in the ICU. But this product has a couple of electrodes, and those electrodes are positioned at the back of the mouth in the throat. It's attached to a source of energy, And the treatment is given for a 10-minute period for 3, 4, or 5 consecutive days, depending on how quickly the patient responds. And that neurostimulation effect retrains the brain on how to swallow. Now, I know that sounds a little bit science fiction, I appreciate that. But over the last 20 years, the company have published many scientific and clinical studies, both demonstrating what happens in dysphagia and how their product helps.
So does it work?
It does work. So they've got clinical data, 7 or 8 published studies now, but large studies in Europe mainly, showing you can reduce the hospital length of stay from about 13 days from about 6 days. And if we go back to what we're trying to do in the health economic strategy generally, this is a first-in-class technology. There's nothing else out there that can do this. And of course, it has the potential to really improve patient outcomes, but also it's making a real cost saving for the healthcare system. So that hopefully brings to life how you can do a little bit of both. The third thing that we always try and do in our investments is to target companies who are already on the market. We don't think there's any point making impact in 10 years' time when the problem is today. So this company is already on the market, including in the United Kingdom, as well as the United States. So we led that financing round. It was about a £34 million round, and that round will allow the company to scale its operations in Europe, as well as advancing the technology in the US market.
And there was one other company briefly, you mentioned it earlier, about called Neurent Medical, I believe, which helps with rhinitis. I don't know whether anybody here suffers from rhinitis. My father does, so it's particularly interesting to me. It's a nasal disease, and this company helps with it. Do you want to very briefly explain what it does?
Yeah, certainly. So as you say, when we talk about rhinitis, we're talking about things like runny noses and irritation and congestion. And for a lot of us, we think of the common cold or hay fever, but for a group of patients, it's a chronic problem. It has a material effect on quality of life and on mental health as well. And by the time the patients reach the specialists, they've been through all sorts of medications, most of which don't really work. There are surgical options, but they're really quite brutal, and therefore not many of them are done. But what Neurent Medical have done is created a way to treat these patients, but in the physician's office. So it's a device that goes inside the nose. It's got radio frequency electrodes on the product. It takes about 30 seconds per nostril. It's done under a topical anesthetic, so just a little bit of a rub. And what it does is it disrupts the nerves that cause this issue. And again, all from the comfort of the patient's office. So it's more like going to the dentist than it is going for an operating room procedure. Again, it's a commercial company. They're not actually commercial yet in Europe. They are commercial in the United States. And they're really providing an option to physicians to be able to treat patients in a completely different and much more cost-effective way.
Fantastic. So I think we've heard a really broad range of different ideas here across energy, across artificial intelligence. I'm still not entirely sure how it works, and healthcare. And I think you'll all agree that we've learned stuff, and there are some amazing investment opportunities to be had from these companies, and also, I'm sure, from others, some of which will be featuring in my column tomorrow. So I just want to say thank you very much to everybody, for all of you for coming to watch and listen, and to our 3 panelists, thank you very much.
Thank you.